Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we are diving deep into a situation that's generating a lot of discussion and analysis,
Yeah,
especially around the Jacksonville Jaguars and their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence.
that's right.
You've shared some really compelling source material with us for this deep dive, specifically insights drawn from an article on Yardbarker. And that piece pulls directly from a conversation on the Brent and Austin Show podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And, when people talk about a quarterback, especially one who maybe hasn't quite hit that ceiling yet or is facing some questions, the immediate thing, the go-to analysis, it almost always focuses on mechanics.
Oh, definitely.
Throwing motion, footwork, technique. It's the stuff you can see, right? The tangible actions on the field.
Exactly. It's sort of the easy thing to point to, isn't it? You hear coaches, analysts, fans, they're always dissecting those physical actions.
Mm.
Are his feet set? Is his base wide enough? Is he, like, stepping into his throws the right way?
Mm.
And for a while now, Trevor Lawrence's footwork, that's been one of those areas that, keeps coming up as something needing refinement.
It really is a classic quarterback mechanical critique. And look, for good reason. I mean, sound footwork is pretty fundamental. It's the foundation for consistent throwing accuracy velocity. So it's only natural that it would be a point of discussion.
Okay.
But what's immediately fascinating about the source material you've given us and where it takes a short turn is that it basically says to look past those mechanics for a second.
Right.
The article kicks off with a very direct statement, telling us, and I'm quoting here, forget for the moment about Trevor Lawrence's footwork.
That phrase, it's a powerful signal, isn't it? It kind of acknowledges the common narrative, what everyone's talking about, but then immediately says, hold on, that's not the main thing here.
Yeah.
It's like the analysts are saying, look, we know you're probably thinking about footwork, but just pause that thought because that's not really the core of the problem as we see it. It's a complete redirection. Like, wait, what? And this is where the central tension or maybe the main revelation of this source comes in. If it's not about the how of his footwork, then, well, what is it about?
Mm-hmm.
And the source pivots pretty hard. It suggests the real issue is deeper. It's not just the mechanics themselves, but the fundamental stability of the foundation he's operating on.
Yeah, they're using that imagery, feet and foundation, but they're applying it to something much, much broader than just physical technique.
Right.
It's suggesting the problem isn't actually in his feet, but maybe in the ground under his feet. The environment, the context, the whole history surrounding him there in Jacksonville.
So it's where his feet are scrambling, not just how they're scrambling, geographically speaking, but really organizationally.
Exactly. It's a clever way to put it, linking it back but pointing deeper.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive then is to really follow that thread.
Yeah.
We want to extract the crucial insights from this article, these analyses from Brent Martineau and Austin Lane on the Brent and Austin Show, and truly understand what they're pinpointing as the main challenge facing Lawrence and the Jaguars as we look towards the 2025 season.
Absolutely.
We're going to pull directly from the points they make to kind of build this picture.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond maybe the easy, visible explanations, the mechanics, and trying to get a handle on the systemic, the historical factors that these analysts argue are the real hurdles, based on what's in the source material.
So let's start right there with that contrast, the surface level talk versus the problem the source actually reveals. Like we said, the article immediately tells us, forget for the moment about Trevor Lawrence's footwork.
And that's significant, right? Because it acknowledges that, yeah, footwork is a legitimate thing people analyze. They talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But by saying forget it, even just for a moment, it's setting up this argument that, okay, maybe it's relevant, but it's actually secondary to something more fundamental. It's kind of like saying, yeah, okay, the paint is chipped over here, but we really need to talk about these massive cracks in the wall.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. They're steering the conversation away from maybe the symptom towards what they see as the underlying cause. And they state very clearly what that perceived core issue is, the stability of the foundation Lawrence is operating on.
That phrasing, stability of the foundation, it's powerful. It really evokes the sense of insecurity, like shifting ground beneath him.
Yeah.
It's not just that his technique might be a bit off, but that the very base he's working from, it's unstable. And they're not really talking about a physical thing here, right? It's the structure, the support, the whole environment provided by the team around him. It suggests that maybe the external chaos is impacting his ability to just play consistently.
And this is where Brent Martineau's perspective from the Brent and Austin Show becomes really important. He seems to bring a degree of skepticism, maybe even doubt, toward the idea that you could just easily fix something as fundamental as footwork at this stage.
Right. He raises this question that really makes you stop and think about, ingrained habits. When they're discussing fixing something like footwork, Martineau asks, and this is a direct quote pulled in the source, "Are you really going to fix something that you've been doing since you were 6 years old?"
Wow. That question just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it?
It really does.
It highlights just the sheer difficulty of fundamentally changing motor skills, muscle memory, that have been developed and reinforced over potentially decades of playing football. It's not just a simple coaching tweak. It could be like a deep rewiring.
And the implication there is pretty profound. If fixing footwork is that difficult, maybe even unlikely to be fully corrected at this level, the elite professional level, well, then maybe focusing all your energy there is kind of misplaced.
Or worse.
Or, yeah, even worse, it could actually have negative consequences.
Which brings us right to Martineau's concern about that potential downside. The downside of focusing too much on those fundamental mechanics. He talks about what happens if a quarterback is actively thinking about something like their footwork while a play is unfolding, in the chaos of an NFL game.
Yeah, his concern, as the source states it, is that if he's thinking about footwork, he's not going to play fast.
Now, playing fast as a quarterback in the NFL, that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
And it's not really about how quickly you can physically run, though, that helps.
Right. It's mental speed.
It's primarily about mental processing speed.
Exactly. It's about reading the defense after the snap, identifying coverages, recognizing blitzes, going through your reads almost instantaneously, making split-second decisions. It's reacting instinctively, not analyzing things mechanically.
So if a quarterback's back there in the pocket, and instead of dedicating like 100% of their mental bandwidth to reading the defense and anticipating throws, they're using up a significant chunk of that energy to consciously monitor their own footwork. Like, am I taking the right drop steps? Is my front foot pointing the right way? Is my base stable? It just inevitably slows down that crucial mental processing.
It's like the difference between speaking fluently, just talking, and maybe haltingly trying to read a foreign language you're just learning.
Good comparison.
One requires almost no conscious effort on the mechanics, right? It allows your mind to focus on the message, the meaning. The other demands huge mental resources just to get the words out, and it leaves very little brain power left for actual comprehension or nuance.
Yeah.
And for a quarterback, that fraction of a second lost to thinking about your feet, that can be the difference between a touchdown and incompletion or, a game-changing pick six.
So Martineau's point seems to be that even if footwork is an issue, forcing Lawrence to overthink it in game situations could actually hurt the very play-fast ability he needs to succeed.
Right.
It reinforces the idea that if the real problem isn't something easily fixable, or maybe something you shouldn't try to fix by overthinking it, then the attention really needs to shift elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be on whatever is preventing him from just playing instinctively and quickly, which, according to this source, circles right back to that unstable foundation.
It really highlights that potential trap, focusing on the wrong thing. If the fundamental issue is external consistency, environment then trying to fix it through internal mechanical adjustments is not only super difficult, but it could actually hinder the player more than help.
Which brings us directly to that unstable foundation then. The source material you gave us provides some pretty concrete evidence to illustrate this lack of stability around Trevor Lawrence. What's the key fact presented there?
Well, the most salient fact, the one that really jumps out to highlight this instability, is that Lawrence is entering the 2025 season, believe it or not, with his third head coach in just 5 years.
Third head coach in 5 years. Just for context, the average NFL head coach tenure is somewhere around, 3 to 4 years, maybe?
Roughly, yeah.
So for a young quarterback, arguably the most critical position on the field, to experience that much turnover so early in his career, that is just exceptionally disruptive.
Oh, it's massive. Think about what comes with a new head coach. It's often not just the head coach, right? It's usually a new offensive coordinator, completely different offensive scheme, totally new terminology, new play calls, new ways of running meetings, different coaching styles, new expectations.
It's like learning a whole new language.
Exactly. You have to learn a new language, a new rhythm, a new way of doing everything.
And you have to do this not just once after your rookie year, which is disruptive enough, but twice before you even enter your fifth season. Each one of those transitions requires significant time, mental energy just to adapt, to build trust with the new coaches, and become fluent in whatever new system they're running.
And for a quarterback, I mean, that position demands mastery of the offense, seamless communication with literally everyone on the offensive side of the ball. Constant change just makes achieving that mastery incredibly difficult. It's hard to build consistent habits, that foundational understanding, when the foundation itself keeps shifting under you.
Yeah, you just can't get comfortable, can you?
No, it's not just learning new plays on paper, it's learning a whole new way to play the game, a new strategic approach within that specific system. And that takes repetition, consistency, and crucially, time. 3 different systems in 4 off seasons severely limits anyone's ability to develop that deep fluency, that instinctual comfort level.
Okay, so who is this third head coach? The one Lawrence is now tasked with building a relationship with and mastering yet another offense under. The source introduces him as Liam Coen.
Yes, Liam Coen. And the article uses some pretty noteworthy descriptions for him. He's called a quarterback whisperer and also an offensive wizard.
Okay, those aren't just casual terms thrown around lightly in the NFL. Quarterback whisperer suggests someone who's particularly good at connecting with, teaching, and developing quarterbacks on a really deep level. Addressing not just the mechanics, but the mental side, the psychological aspects of playing the position.
Right. An offensive wizard implies, strategic brilliance, someone who can design and run a highly effective, maybe creative offense.
And the source seems to justify these labels by pointing to Cohen's recent track record. It mentions him turning the 2024 Tampa Bay Buccaneers just last season into a, quote, balanced, touchdown-producing machine.
Yeah, that's a pretty concrete example, isn't it? Taking an offense and making it highly productive, especially hitting that key metric everyone ultimately cares about, scoring touchdowns, putting points on the board.
So, the fact that the Jaguars went out and brought in a coach with that specific reputation, with that very recent success in making an offense a touchdown-producing machine, it really underscores what the immediate goal is here.
No question.
And according to Martineau, Cohen's first priority, his primary task, is crystal clear.
Yeah, Martineau states it explicitly. Cohen's primary job is to fix whatever's wrong with Jacksonville's quarterback.
Wow. That's the mandate, plain and simple. And tying this back to Martineau's earlier skepticism about footwork being the core problem.
Yeah.
The fix they're likely talking about here, the one this supposed quarterback whisperer is brought in for, it's probably something deeper than just simple mechanical adjustment.
It strongly suggests that the organization, or at least these analysts interpreting the situation for the source, understands that the problem isn't just, Lawrence's physical technique. It's something that a coach skilled in QB psychology, scheme design, offensive balance might be able to address. Potentially, those foundational issues we talked about, the ones caused by all that past instability. But the question the source implicitly raises is huge. Can even a whisperer, a wizard, fix problems that might be rooted in years of turbulent history, especially in just one single offseason?
It's a massive challenge dumped right into the lap of both the coach and the player. And to really appreciate just the sheer weight of this task, the source provides some really critical historical context and comparison points. First, let's touch on the fan perspective, which Martineau brings into the mix.
Yeah, Martineau highlights the impatience, you could say, of the Jaguars fan base. Understandably right. Heading into 2025, they're not really looking for explanations or, excuses about why things haven't clicked perfectly yet.
No, they want results.
They want results, exactly. They want touchdowns and actual wins on the field.
That's the bottom line for any fan base, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially one that's endured some pretty tough seasons and now sees their potential franchise quarterback, the #1 pick, entering his 5th year. And the source acknowledges this desire for tangible success, while also, importantly, referencing the, quote, many obstacles Lawrence has had to overcome in his early career. So the source is directly linking that fan frustration to the player's difficult path, pointing back to that instability we discussed.
And to put Lawrence's difficult path into really stark perspective, Martineau offers a direct comparison, a comparison to arguably the premier quarterback in the entire league right now, Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh, yeah. That comparison is powerful because it's just such a contrast. Martineau's quote, cited in the source, is very blunt. Patrick Mahomes hasn't had to deal with any of the stuff that Lawrence has had to deal with in that way.
He even adds, for emphasis, none of it. And he lists the specific types of things Mahomes, by comparison, just hasn't faced early in his career. Negativity, to the Urban Meyer, to the different offenses.
Okay, let's really unpack that Urban Meyer obstacle for a second, because the source provides specific details that highlight just how uniquely challenging that whole period was. Trevor Lawrence began his NFL career under head coach Urban Meyer.
And that tenure in Jacksonville, I mean, it's infamous across the league, wasn't it? Just a disaster.
Pretty much.
The source reminds us Meyer's time was remarkably short, incredibly tumultuous, and it ended with him being fired late in the 2021 season after a dismal, 2-11 start.
Yeah, 2-11. Think about that. You're a rookie quarterback, the #1 overall pick, the face of the franchise. And you start your entire NFL journey under a head coach whose tenure is so dysfunctional, so brief, that he doesn't even make it through his first full season.
Yeah.
The source uses the word negativity, and honestly, that feels like putting it mildly compared to all the widespread reports of just organizational chaos, player alienation, bizarre behavior, everything that seemed to characterize Meyer's short time there.
It's almost impossible to overstate how damaging that kind of environment could be for a young player's foundational development. I mean, instead of stepping into a stable, professional, supportive environment designed to kind of ease his transition to the pros.
Which is what you'd expect for a #1 pick.
Exactly. Lawrence started his career in what was widely perceived as a complete circus. He didn't get to just learn the ropes in a normal way. He was immediately plunged into dysfunction. That's not just a coaching change later on. That's starting your career on incredibly shaky ground, maybe even toxic ground, right from day one.
So then came the second head coach, Doug Peterson. And Martineau observes that Lawrence actually started out better under Peterson. So that indicates, a positive shift and improvement from the Meyer mess, suggesting some initial progress and maybe adaptation to a more stable coaching presence and a new system.
Yes, definitely. It shows resilience on Lawrence's part and the ability to improve when the environment around him improves, at least somewhat. There was that period where things looked pretty promising, right? They made that playoff push.
He did. But the source also introduces a point of stagnation, or maybe plateauing, during the Peterson era, according to Martineau. He says, quote, by the time he got used to the Doug Peterson offense, it looked like it had gone stale.
Gone stale.
Yeah.
That's an interesting phrase to describe an offense, isn't it?
It is.
It suggests that maybe after a certain point it lacked creativity, or it became predictable to defenses, or perhaps it just stopped evolving with the players they had or with league trends. It implies that even though Lawrence was adapting, getting comfortable, the offensive system itself wasn't providing like a continuously upward path for growth and success.
It sounds like another form of arrested development, maybe. You escape the initial chaos, you find some stability, you start to adapt.
Yeah.
But then the system you're adapting to might become a ceiling in itself.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It prevents you from reaching your full potential, not because the player can't adapt, but because the system itself just kind of plateaus or gets figured out.
Right. So you've got the initial kind of severe trauma of the Meyer-era dysfunction, followed by a period of adaptation under Peterson that, while definitely an improvement, eventually resulted in an offense that apparently felt stale. And now, entering year 5, it's a third system under a third head coach. I mean, this whole historical context, it paints a really vivid picture of that instability of the foundation, the source argues, is the real core issue.
And this backdrop, this history of instability, it directly informs the expectations being placed on Trevor Lawrence right now, heading into 2025. This is where Austin Lane, Martineau's partner on the podcast, seems to offer a very direct and maybe a less forgiving perspective on the timeline for results.
Yeah, Lane seems pretty focused on who gets a pass and who doesn't in Jacksonville this year. He mentions that, a top draft pick like Travis Hunter, he'll get some slack. Naturally, right, he's a rookie adjusting to the NFL.
Sure, makes sense.
And the new head coach, Liam Coen, he'll also get some slack, some time.
And the reasoning is pretty straightforward. It's their first year there in Jacksonville. They're installing new stuff, building new relationships, adapting to a new city, new organization. There's generally an acknowledged transition period for newcomers.
But Lane is apparently adamant about who does not get that same slack. And that, according to him, is Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, and this is despite the fact that Lawrence also has to learn a new offense under this new head coach. Lane acknowledges that reality, saying, this is a quote, for Trevor Lawrence, I understand it's another new offense and another new head coach, but he has to play well right away, in my opinion.
That phrase, play well right away, that's really the crux of the expectation he's laying out there. It's like, regardless of the historical context we just spent time discussing, regardless of the fact he's learning his third system, the time for adaptation, for excuses, from Lane's point of view anyway, it's over.
Yeah.
It's year 5. And immediate high-level performance is basically the mandate.
And Lane gives us a specific performance metric mentioned in the source that he views as just unacceptable. It's indicative of the sort of external perception of Lawrence's expected performance level.
Right. He points to Lawrence's 2025 ESPN fantasy draft projection.
Right.
And the numbers cited in the source are 22 touchdowns and 14 interceptions.
22 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. Okay, let's just pause on those numbers for a second.
Yeah.
For a quarterback drafted first overall, someone who was supposed to be, generational, expected to be in the absolute top tier of the league, those numbers, that projection, it reflects pretty limited offensive production and way too many turnovers.
It's mediocre at best.
Yeah, and Lane's reaction is strong.
He doesn't hold back at all. Quoting Lane directly from the source, he calls those numbers simply not good.
Yeah.
And he stresses, with emphasis, that can't be the case.
He even adds something like, he doesn't care what the other stats say if those core metrics, the TDs and the INTs, look like that.
And that really highlights why touchdowns and interceptions are so often seen as these critical measures, right? Touchdowns are points. They're the ultimate goal of an offensive drive. Interceptions, they're drive killers. They often swing momentum, field position, just dramatically in favor of the other team. So a healthy ratio of touchdowns to interceptions, it's fundamental to quarterback efficiency, trustworthiness. A projection of 22 TDs against 14 INTs. That suggests a quarterback who isn't maximizing scoring chances through the air and is giving the ball away too often, which just fundamentally undermines the team's ability to win consistently.
It's basically a projection of a quarterback who is, at best, maybe average in terms of those high-leverage passing outcomes. And for someone with Lawrence's draft status and now likely contract expectations coming up, average just isn't good enough.
Not even close.
So Lane is using this fantasy projection almost as a stand-in for the general expectation out there. And he's saying, point blank, that level of performance is unacceptable for what Jacksonville needs in 2025. The pressure isn't just for some improvement, it's for a significant jump, a leap in concrete production numbers, and it has to happen immediately.
Yeah, it clearly defines the baseline for what's expected or maybe demanded. And according to Lane's perspective here, the current projection falls way, way short of that.
Okay, so this intense expectation, this need for immediate results, it's also underscored by the context of the Jaguars' 2025 schedule, which the source material brings into the discussion as well. How does the article describe their schedule?
It characterizes it as one that won't have the toughest schedule in the NFL this year, but it's far from the weakest. So it kind of middle of the road, maybe leaving slightly tougher in certain spots, but not a gauntlet.
Okay, not the hardest, not the easiest,
Yeah.
but the source points out a specific dynamic within that schedule that really creates a sense of urgency. There's a point where the schedule potentially gets more favorable.
Yes, exactly. The article notes that if the Jaguars are still in contention for a playoff spot after, say, 11 games, then the remaining schedule seems to ease up significantly.
That's a really critical detail, isn't it? It means the first 11 games are likely the tougher stretch. That's the period where they need to hold their own, maybe steal some wins against varied competition, just to position themselves for a potential postseason push. Surviving, or ideally thriving through those first 11 games, seems paramount.
Absolutely paramount. You have to still be in the hunt by that point, by week 11 or 12, for that easier closing stretch to even matter in terms of playoff positioning. I mean, if you've dug yourself too deep a hole in the first two-thirds of the season, finishing strong against maybe weaker opponents might improve your final record, make it look a bit more respectable, but it won't necessarily get you into the playoffs. The damage might already be done.
And the source actually lists the specific opponents in that final 7-game stretch that make the schedule potentially more favorable if they've managed to put themselves in contention by then.
Yeah, those teams listed are the Indianapolis Colts twice, the Tennessee Titans twice, the New York Jets, and the Arizona Cardinals.
Okay, so 4 of those 7 games are within their own division, the Colts and Titans. Now, divisional games are always tough, always battles, but playing rivals late in the season, especially if your team is playing well and has momentum, those can be huge opportunities to pick up crucial wins that directly impact the standings and tiebreakers. The source seems to frame this as a potential advantage if they reach that point still in the mix.
It provides a really clear, almost strategic timeline for the season. Navigate the tougher early schedule successfully, get through those first 11 games with a decent record, and you potentially earn a more manageable path to the playoffs down the home stretch.
And this strategic consideration, this sort of necessity of being in contention by Game 11, it directly amplifies the pressure on Trevor Lawrence to perform immediately right from the start. The conclusion drawn from this schedule context seems really clear, and it just reinforces Lane's earlier point about urgency.
Yeah, it adds significant weight to that demand for a fast start. Quoting Lane again from the source to emphasize this urgency. Trevor Lawrence is the guy that has to be good right away.
He leaves absolutely no room for a slow ramp-up period, does he? He says, you can't have, in my opinion, any slow start, any of that, whoever it's on. Now, while he does use that phrase, whoever it's on, the primary focus throughout this whole discussion in the source and the clear implication is that as the quarterback, as the engine of the offense, the responsibility for avoiding that slow start rests pretty squarely on Lawrence's shoulders.
The message is just unequivocal. The time for adaptation, for overcoming those historical hurdles we talked about, for getting comfortable in yet another new system, it all needs to be compressed now. The schedule demands a team that is ready to compete and win from day one, and in the NFL, that starts with the quarterback.
Yeah.
Lane's final statement in this section really drives the point home. For Lawrence, it's time to go.
It's time to go. Wow. That's kind of the final word on the urgency heading into 2025, isn't it?
Yeah.
It perfectly encapsulates this blend of sky-high expectations, the backdrop of past struggles, and the immediate pressure cooker created by the schedule. So, okay, let's try to bring all these interconnected points from the source material together just to get a complete picture of what these analysts are saying.
Okay, yeah. Based on the insights you've shared from that Yardbarker article and the Brendan Austin show clips, the key arguments presented in the source material seem to boil down to this. First, the analysts express, significant skepticism that simple mechanical issues like footwork are really the primary problem holding Trevor Lawrence back.
Right. Second, they identify the core issue as the significant and prolonged instability of the foundation around him, specifically citing the constant coaching changes, the uniquely challenging Urban Meyer start, and then the perceived offensive stagnation under Doug Peterson as major factors that have likely impacted his development and his ability to find consistent footing.
Third, despite this acknowledged history of instability and the fact that he's again adapting to his third head coach and third offensive system in 5 years, there are still extremely high and, crucially, immediate performance expectations being placed on Lawrence heading into 2025.
Yeah, no grace period mentioned. Fourth, that concerning 2025 fantasy projection, 22 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, it serves as a kind of tangible proxy for the external perception of his expected performance level. And analysts like Lane view that projection as completely unacceptable, indicating the level of output that absolutely can't be the case this year.
And fifth, the context of the 2025 schedule with its potential late-season favorability that's totally contingent on a strong early record, it mandates the team, and specifically the quarterback, must perform at a high level right away to have any real shot at capitalizing on that schedule and making a serious playoff push.
So this entire analysis, all these threads, they really converge on a central challenge, don't they? Particularly for this new partnership between the head coach, Liam Coen, and Trevor Lawrence.
The challenge is immense. Can Coen, this highly touted quarterback whisperer, who is explicitly brought in to fix whatever's wrong, can he effectively address issues that seem so deeply rooted in years of organizational instability and potentially negative experiences that happened long before he even arrived?
Right. Are these challenges even within the scope of a single coaching change and installing a new offense? Or are they maybe more ingrained, more psychological, harder to fix quickly?
Especially when the demand, as articulated so clearly in the source, is for immediate high-level performance. It kind of bypasses the typical grace period you might expect or even need for a player and coach learning a brand new system together.
It's like this inherent conflict, isn't it? Between the need for time to build a truly stable foundation, time to build rapport in a new environment, versus the urgent requirement to perform now as if that stability and fluency already exist.
It raises really complex questions about the whole nature of quarterback development in the NFL. How much can sheer talent overcome a really turbulent environment? How much can one coach, even one with a great reputation like Coen seems to have, how much can they really mitigate the cumulative impact of years of instability and difficult experiences?
Yeah.
It's not just about learning a playbook. It might be about, unlearning negative habits or overcoming the psychological effects of past chaos, all while under this immense pressure to succeed immediately.
And this situation, drawn from the sources you shared, it really offers a valuable lens for you, the listener, to think about quarterback development more broadly. It goes way beyond just evaluating a player's stats or their physical gifts.
Definitely.
It highlights the profound impact that organizational stability, coaching consistency, and just the overall environmental factors have on a young player's ability to actually thrive, not just survive.
It forces you to consider what conditions are truly necessary for a high draft pick, a supposed franchise cornerstone, to not just, tread water, but to actually reach their ceiling in the intense, often unforgiving world of the NFL. This isn't just a Jaguar story, really. It's kind of a case study in the complex ecosystem that's required for success at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
It illustrates how much more goes into it than just the player's individual talent.
It really makes you reflect on how much of a player's career trajectory is truly within their own control versus how much is shaped, maybe even predetermined by the circumstances they happen to be dropped into.
Immensely, the environment, the situation is just such a powerful, powerful force in shaping outcomes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the sources you shared with us today, we've explored this debate over what's truly hindering Trevor Lawrence. Is it mechanics, or is it something deeper? We've looked at the undeniable impact of the historical instability he's faced, the intense pressure for immediate results now in 2025, and how that schedule context just amplifies the urgency.
Yeah, it paints a picture that's far more complex, far more nuanced than just saying he needs to fix his footwork. It's really about the entire context he's operating within and the enormous task ahead for both him and this new coaching staff, all under a very compressed timeline for results.
And it leaves us with this final thought to ponder, based solely on the material we've explored here today. Given the significant degree of foundational instability that Trevor Lawrence has faced throughout his early NFL career instability, that seems pretty unique compared to many of his peers, including starting with that truly challenging Urban Meyer situation, and considering the current expectation, highlighted so clearly in these sources, for him to perform at a high level right away, despite stepping into his third offensive system under his third head coach in just 5 years. Well, what does this whole situation tell us about the realistic expectations we should place on even the most highly talented young quarterbacks? How much can a new coach, even a whisperer, realistically fix issues that might stem from years of past turbulence? And what does this specific scenario reveal about the necessary balance, that interplay between player ability, coaching influence, and sustained organizational stability that's truly required for long-term success in the National Football League?
Yeah, it certainly gives you a lot to consider as we head towards the 2025 season.
A tremendous amount.